Hi there, and welcome to an Insomnia Insight that is per popular demand, or I should say it's rather a popular demand from one specific member of the community, which is Jarl. Jarl, hope this will make a lot of sense to you. And I know a lot of people actually asked about this, so I think it makes total sense to talk about this after a specific episode that was actually Talking Insomnia 54. And check that one for more on this topic with Marina. That episode was where we started talking about somniphobia, and there were a lot of questions about it. So I think it makes total sense to talk more about it. And just for a very quick background, Marina was my client in BedTyme, and she had this fear of falling asleep and the process of falling asleep. And she actually, when I was talking to her about that, I was like, I should talk more about this on the channel. I asked her, hey, do you mind talking about this because you experienced it? And she was willing to do that. And I was super glad, because that brought a whole different perspective that was so helpful from someone who's experienced it. So again, check Talking Insomnia 54 for more. Now let's get into it. So what is somniphobia? Well, it is the fear of sleeping and or the process of falling asleep. Somni is, sleep. Phobia is the fear of, right? Now, before we, talk more about, okay, what's going on and what should you do if you've experienced this, then I think it helps to talk about what is really a phobia, So if I just kind of Googled it, and the definition that I came across were variations of this one: an extreme or irrational fear or aversion to something, which I actually don't think is necessarily true, in the sense of this one that, there's a level of judgment in these definitions, which is extreme or irrational, meaning like it doesn't make sense. Well, sure, it doesn't make sense to be afraid of like breathing, right? In a way, because breathing can't hurt us, let's say. But on the flip side, if somebody was actually attacked by a grizzly bear, they would nobody would say it's irrational to experience the emotion fear in that situation. Well, what if, there is no grizzly bear, but you truly believe it? Like you truly believe that something really, really harmful is happening to you. Is it then extreme or irrational to have fear? Of course not. It's completely logical, So to me, it's completely logical to have these type of fears or these reactions. So to me, phobia is more of like fear of something that cannot or is unlikely to hurt you. And if something that cannot hurt you is, for example, short sleep, insomnia, emotions, being scared, being angry, mind states, or bodily functions such as breathing, those things cannot harm us. So that's fear of something that cannot harm us, or also things that are unlikely to harm us, like flying, or rather crashing, right? Or spiders. Those are unlikely to harm us. They could, but they're unlikely to harm us. So that, to me, that is a phobia, and I just mentioned this to remove this idea that a thought or an emotion can be wrong, which they cannot. They're just thoughts, and emotions are just like logical responses to what happens outside us or inside us. So I just want to say that extreme, irrational, it doesn't ring true to me. It's just that we're fearful of something that cannot hurt us, that's or unlikely to hurt us, is my definition of phobia. Now, with that said, in a state of fear, like when we are scared of something, we can often be scared of something else, like because the brain is in the safety mode, like it's trying to keep us safe from various things. And this could be a problem. This could be a problem, right? So in light of that, we can see that there's actually a lot of things that we could think of as phobias. Let's start with this one. So insomnia, to me, is really a phobia. It's the fear of being awake. So we could call that actually vigiliophobia. The Latin word for wakefulness is apparently vigilance or vigilia or something like that. So insomnia, I think of as a phobia, vigiliophobia. Now, we often talk about on this channel about hypnic jerks. You're about to fall asleep, and it's something, you jerk awake your whole body or your legs or your arms or something like that. And that can be really scary, and people can have a lot of them, really disruptive. So it's not like that person has hypnic jerks. It's really jerkophobia, really, right? It's the fear of having these jerks that keeps them going. So it would be actually more true to call that jerk phobia. Same thing with when you're about to fall asleep and you have awareness of falling asleep. It would be true to call that actually not hypnic awareness, which I usually refer to, but rather, hypnic awareness phobia, or anxiety is just an emotion, right? Every human being experiences it. But when somebody says, I have anxiety or having a lot of anxiety, that actually is more of like, it's more true to call that anxiophobia, because it's the fear of being anxious and trying to get away from an emotional state that is what drives it, that causes it to be an ongoing unpleasant experience in life, or palpitations for that matter. Like we often feel our heartbeat kind of strong or a couple of times, right? But when that is something that we are afraid of and try to get away from, and that causes us to notice it even more, that's not actually palpitations. It's more palpitophobia, if you will, or racing thoughts. Racing thoughts is very descriptive. It just means like I have a lot of thoughts that are ongoing, which doesn't say anything about how it's experienced. But when we want to get away from racing thoughts and when it's disturbing to us, that is actually more true to think of as cognitive phobia, for example. I'm just making these words up. But the point of like this part is just to share that there's nothing special about somniphobia. When we're scared and feel like we're kind of losing control, somniphobia, in fact, is very, very logical, because the process of falling asleep and of sleeping those are processes that we have no control over. And that idea of like, oh my gosh, I can't control this. What if, what happens when I sleep? What's going on when I sleep? I'm unconscious of. It's actually very logical if you think about it, that can be something we become scared of in the context of fear and all the other things that you can become scared of, right? So that's my point. There's nothing special, unusual, strange about somniphobia. It's actually very logical when you think about it. So let's get more practical. We've looked at kind of the background here. So what to do if you feel like, or if you notice that, okay, this is it, I've had this somniphobia, what should I do? I wrote down 3 things. Number 1, see that it's just one of many manifestations of fear or something that cannot harm you. And that's basically what we talked about here. So I'm not going to dwell on that, but just this awareness I think is very helpful. Number 2, know that all emotions are signals, and don't confuse the signal with the threat. This I think is very important, because I think this happens so often. When something, again, the grizzly bear, say you're attacked by a grizzly bear, it's the fear is just a signal. The fear is just something that's supposed to make us run or hide, right? Or something like that. But when we think of the fear that as the thing that's not supposed to be there, then things get confusing, because the more you try to get away from the fear, which is the signal again, the more it is like, I don't want to hear the signal. I don't want to listen to you, brain. I just want to get away from this. Then the brain's like, wait, you don't want to listen to what I'm saying? Then I'm going to push that even harder. So the signal becomes even stronger. So with emotions, it's like that the more we try to not have a negative emotion, the more that emotion is amplified by the brain, because it thinks we're not listening. You got to give us more and more and more and more of that signal, right? So when you see this in the context of somniphobia, that I have this fear of falling asleep or being asleep, and you see that, oh, the more I try to make myself not have this fear, the more I'm going to have it, right? So for example, it can be like, okay, I understand that it's nothing harmful. I see the thing, but how can I convince my brain that it's nothing to be afraid of? How can I stop my brain from thinking it's something to be afraid of? There you're not listening again. Like you're trying to make the fear go away by convincing the brain that it's supposed to not produce this fear or something like that, right? So then again, the fear is just a signal. And when you don't think of the signal as a threat, things get more peaceful, because then you will, number 3 here, allow yourself to think and feel. When you think, oh my gosh, I have somniphobia, why can't I stop thinking about this? Then you're not allowing yourself to think whatever pops up in your brain. You're trying to change what's going on in there. And then those thoughts become very sticky. Same thing with emotions. And going back to reviewing this again, we can see that being awake at night, hypnic jerks, the emotion we call anxiety, palpitations, racing thoughts, these are examples of like mind state emotions. They are, all of them in themselves, completely normal, a part of being a human being, right? But it's when we are afraid of them that we get into trouble. When we become afraid of being awake, we have insomnia. When we become afraid of having the jerks, we have like multiple jerks, right? When we are afraid of feeling anxious, when we become anxious about being anxious, when we're scared of being scared, when we try to run away, that's when we get into trouble. So same thing with the somniphobia. It's when we become afraid of having somniphobia. That's really when we get into trouble. That became, an interesting, I think I added, that became like a little, I added too much, an extra thing there. It's not really, when we become afraid of falling asleep and we try to get away from that. That's what I should have said. That's when we get into trouble. So I think a response can be something like, when you have these thoughts about like, oh my gosh, I'm afraid of falling asleep, then you can go, my brain has become scared of sleeping. That makes total sense. I understand that makes total sense. And then you can always deploy this magical formula here, like awareness plus self-kindness, and that equals peace. Because, awareness, again, this is all we talked about here is awareness. You understand what's happening. And then self-kindness is when you're like hard on yourself for not being able to change how you think and feel. And you realize, oh, I can't change how I think and feel like that willfully. I should allow my thoughts to flow. I should just listen to my thoughts without engaging with them. But that can be tricky sometimes. Sometimes you find yourself resisting, trying to fight your thoughts, et cetera, et cetera. Then you apply self-kindness. You're like, oh, that's also totally fine, totally natural. No, all humans do that. That is the path to peace. So I think somniphobia is just one example of many phobias that, when approached in this fashion, again, awareness plus self-kindness, everything becomes very nice and peaceful. Jarl, I hope you found this helpful. Anybody who has comments, please post them in the comment section. If you have questions for open class, as always, you're welcome to post them, to send them via the link in the sleepcoachschool.com. And you can also here at the sleepcoachschool.com find out how you can work with myself if you like to do that in any capacity, or what's going on in general with the school. So that's that. Hope you found this valuable, and I look forward to having you back real soon. Until then,